Hey guys, what's going on? It's Spot the Aussie here, your favourite NRL fantasy coach, doing the round number 6 analysis of what's coming up. So far in round number 5, we're back in action, 774 points. It was a little bit lower than what we wanted, but it was better than the average of coaches out there. In fact, it just puts us inside the top 10,000 coaches for that round, and it puts me at a respective 7,653rd rank after we started in the first round, rank 22. I had some dramas last week in order to do a fantasy video, but I can assure you we're back better than ever. And this video is going to be a quick wrap up with a couple of quick questions I've got from you guys. So if you're enjoying this series, be sure to give this video a thumbs up on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe for more, because this is going to be coming out each and every week thus far. So let's have a bit of a wrap up so far of your questions. One of the first questions I have here, well, I should say first allotment of questions, is from Random. He said, is that Panthers guy CHN worth picking up if Cartwright is out for only 2 more weeks, or is he another Tyrone's Robert Davis? Now, my opinion is you should have probably picked up Corey last week, because Fantasy have now done this same error twice. Let me talk about this error in the first place. When the 21-man squad is named, Fantasy doesn't add all those names individually to their database and effectively given, the guys who haven't played before a rookie price of 138,000, and therefore you can't bring them into your team if they're named or moved into the 17-man squad before kickoff. So what had happened was, and we saw this again in round number 2, Tyrone Roberts Davis wasn't named, so they pretty much populated him or created him after the week that he played, but they couldn't give him a price bump from that first round. Instead, what they said was, we're still going to offer him at the $138,000 rookie price, but give him a negative break even of, I think it was respectively 23, because he had scored so well in the first round that he'd actually played, that if he was scoring that well, it would accumulate to his new price. And that's exactly what's happened here for CHN. He scored 44 points in that last round, but went up $52,000 because the first round he wasn't added that he played, which was round 4, where he got 62 points. Now, in saying that, is he worth still picking up? Well, his break even is still negative 24. The coaches that own him is only 18%. Before this round, it was actually 16%. So a couple of people are now jumping on him, and the question more or less relates to Bryce Cartwright. If Bryce Cartwright comes back next week, we know Corey's going to play this week. What if Bryce Cartwright comes back next week? Now, let's look at it from this point. If CHN scores 39 points, he goes up by another 50k. And you reckon he's probably going to score another 39 points because of the way he plays. He plays exactly like Bryce Cartwright. He does 2 things when he runs the ball. He runs very hard and very straight and tries to break the line. Otherwise, he hits the line and he always turns and he gives that little bit of a flick back for an offload and gets you those essential attacking stats as a second rower. So he's always going to be able to get at defensive stats, which is tackles. It's just adding to that, getting those attacking stats, and that's why he scored so well, getting 44 in that second round and 62 in the first round. I know that he played the Knights in the first round and their lines were rather broken, and that's why he broke so many times through in order to score. But I think you have to jump on him. And let's look at this worst case scenario. Bryce Cartwright comes back next week. Corey, if you bring him in now, possibly moves up another 50k. His break even again is probably going to be like negative 20, negative 10, 0. So if he plays again, even if he goes back to the interchange, which I think is very likely. Let's say if Bryce Cartwright comes back next week, which we don't know, there's no certainty. If he did come back next week, CHN would probably go to the bench. There's no way he's going to be kicked out of the team for his performances that he's done thus far. It's very rare that you see a starter be in the form that he's in, kicked off straight from the get-go. I think that's a bit of a way to go. So I truly and honestly believe if you don't have CHN now, well, if you didn't get him last week, you should definitely get him now in whatever way. Remember, he's only 190k still. You might look at it and think, well, I've already missed out on the 50k, but do you want to miss out on another 50k and potentially another 70k if he goes up another game? And I think he will. So I think he's here to stay. I think he's one to keep an eye out for, and he's one that you should essentially be trading to. Players to look out at trading this week who have bottomed out the most. Bodene Thompson. Look, Thompson, given the leg injury, no go. Jesse Bromwich, he hasn't hit his form. He still seems to be suffering from the broken thumb that he has. And I'll just bring down this box and I'll bring up my own team for a second so we can have a look at his recent game day. But he just hasn't seemed to be able to come back in full stride. He still has a negative break even. In fact, his last score was 37, which for someone of his standard is relatively low. His break even is 51k, so I would still avoid him. Elliott Whitehead, now I plan to bring him in, not this week, but the next week, because his break even is 48, and he'll most likely hit that, if not be very close. But I have other trades that I need to do in order to get myself there. I think there are better trades, or more essential trades, priority trades if you want to put them, that I have to do. Guys like Paul Vaughan, Coen Hess, Clint Gutherson, the real deal. Now, Paul Vaughan is a very interesting character because when he played last season for the Raiders, he was coming off the interchange and he played an average of about 39 minutes per game. And with his points per minute being about 1.1, he'd score about 40, 41, 42, 43. What we found now with the St. George lineup is that he's starting, but not only is he starting, he's actually averaging about 50 minutes. So he's been given an extra 10 minutes than in what he was last season, which, given the fact that he has a high output of points, means that he's probably good for an extra 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 points each game that he plays with St. George rather than he did for the Raiders. So that's why he continually goes up. And his break-even, I jumped on him last round and picked him up. His break-even last round was relatively low, and even though he only scored his lowest score, or his second lowest score of 44 points, he still went up in value. His break-even again is 37. So you either bring him in now, or you don't bring him in for a while, because after the next round, he's most likely going to peak. He'll go up probably another 5k, and then he'll probably sit there and not do much after that. So if you're going to bring him in, now's probably the best time to do it, if not earlier. Of course, you'd love to say in hindsight you would have brought him in a round or 2 or 3 earlier ago. Coen Hess is a really interesting one. I don't like guys who play off the bench. I know that he was on the bench last round, and then he was moved to the starting team, and now he's moved back to the bench. I don't like that. I think you're going to get stuck with a guy if you decide to trade in Coen Hess now. If you're looking at him as someone who's a keeper, probably look at the lens a little bit more, because I think you're going to be relatively disappointed. His break-even now is 39. We know that he scored low last round because of the concussion. He scored 20. We know he's better than getting a 20, but he did play 50 minutes after all and only got that 20. I just seem to think that people are going to be really disappointed if they jump on him now at a very high price of 432k. I would completely avoid him. Clint Gutherson. Gutherson is the real deal, but here's the thing. If you want keepers in your halves, they have to be the dominant half. I reckon Corey Norman is the dominant half out of those two. I think Shaun Johnson is the dominant half of now Kieran Foran. I think DCE is now the dominant half of Manly out with Blake Green. I really seem to think that if you're going to be picking your halves, they need to be the dominant half. And that's why I've tended to avoid Ben Hunt and also Milford, because one's not more dominant than the other. They effectively get the same amount of ball. They play similar but different games. I guess Ben Hunt's more of a kicking game than what Milford has, so he has a little bit more to offer there. Milford's running game is probably a little bit stronger in the past, but Ben Hunt seems to have stepped up a little bit. He's been able to break the line a few times, where Milford's just got some sort of I don't know if it's to do with the whole Benji Marshall, Wayne Bennett saga that's really blocked him out, but Milford is just going back and back, so that's why I haven't decided to pick up either of those two. In fact, what I've done this round is I've gone with Benny Hampton, and the reason why I've gone with Benny Hampton is because he's now named at hooker. He's starting hooker. We know he doesn't score a lot of points off the bench, and we know that he doesn't have a high points per minute breakout. It's about 0.4 to 0.5, so even if he plays 60 minutes, theoretically, he's probably only going to get, high 20s, low 30s. But I just seem to think that he could potentially pick up his game a little bit and even score, 30 points just tackling in the middle of the field, and then potentially get some more points because of the way the Cowboys play and get a few more attacking stats up there. I'd rather have a whole team of 17 of hookers than a whole team of 1 hooker, 2 forwards, 3 or 4, second rollers. So if I can replace one of my half rolls with a hooker, I'm going to do that. So we seem to think that he might play 80 minutes. And the reason why we're going to think he's going to play 80 minutes is because in the Cowboys lineup at the moment, there's no utility other than Kalen Ponga, who's a back liner. He's not part of the spine in the front row. So I can't see Kalen Ponga coming on. In saying that, you should probably wait till about an hour before the game before making that decision, if you can push it back as far as possible, because they are playing on Saturday night, and see if there's another alternative utility named on the bench. I can't see anyone being brought up last minute, although it is said that who's our boy Lachlan Coote might actually go out with the calf injury. So Kalen Ponga might move from 14 down to 1, which means if you're a Kalen Ponga owner, that's really great news. But in other news is you got to look out for guys like Blake Leary, who have played second row lock and also hooker and can fill in that utility role. I just seem to think with the 17 man now, Hampton might be good for 80 minutes. And traditionally, when he plays 80 minutes, which he's done in the halves, he scores quite well. And he does a good job about throwing the ball around, getting involved, and breaking the line and having a few attacking stats. So I just seem to think that although we haven't seen him play 80 minutes in the hooker role, I think he's going to be good for probably 30-40. And that's what you think most hookers would be if they're going to play that. Even the ordinary hookers like the Levi's are going to be scoring around that mark. So I've brought him in for Cartwright, and that's another question that I've got off Code Delta, who said, when do you cut? When do you decide to cut someone? Look, I've decided to cut Cartwright because it was about the time I had to do it, because Cartwright definitely wasn't going to get named anytime soon. There's no updates with him. It's like, I actually tweeted Gus Gould and said, what's the go with Bryce Cartwright? And he said, look, we're monitoring it week in, week out, day by day, seeing if it hurts when he walks on it. That's not good news. You know, no one in the media's been able to give us a direct date when he's going to come back. In fact, the media kept screwing us around 2 weeks ago saying, oh, he's going to play next week, and he's not even named. So I've brought him out, and I've brought in Benny Hampton as a huge cash out option. The alternatives are you could bring Benny Hampton in at your hooker role for, if you're in a stuck situation with Brayley for the Sharks, who's now got Seguiaro debating for that position. The other reason why I decided to change out Cartwright is because I was losing so many points in the halves. I had to play Riley Jacks while effectively Bryce Cartwright sat on the sideline being worth over $400,000. That's never good. If you have someone that big sitting on the sideline for so long, that's the potential points that you're losing, because effectively you're buying fantasy points. The more you spend, the more you should be getting in return, and that wasn't happening. So I was playing Riley Jacks, who isn't a dominant half by any means. I mean, Cooper Cronk does all the kicking, Cameron Smith kicks from dummy half. Riley Jacks barely touches the ball, where Cronk is everywhere with Slater, and it just doesn't effectively work. And playing Kane Elgey, now that is just wrong. The guy scored 2 tries on the weekend and still only scores 33 points. That just goes to show how much of a poor scorer Elgey is. But more importantly, I can possibly bring back Cartwright in 5 or 6 weeks once Hampton gets a little bit more money under his belt. We know he's going to be there for probably 3, 4, 5, possibly even 6 weeks as a potential with Granville's injury. But Cartwright could come back. His break-even's 81. He won't score that well. And then I could bring him in sooner rather than later. Next question from Random is Elijah Taylor worth holding? You betcha, because guess what? Ivan Cleary loves him, and whenever he played for the Panthers and Warriors underneath him, he played 80 minutes. So if you've held on to Elijah Taylor for this long, he's definitely a hold for the future to come. Is Sione Matautia becoming the new Mitch Aubusson in being a DPP second rower centre hampered by his own utility? Yes and no. Mitch Aubusson looks amazing this year. He is scoring so well. In fact, if you need a centre, a reliable centre who's going to be scoring you fantasy points, it's going to be Mitch Aubusson. And the reason why is because they now have a backup utility centre in Joseph Manu, who they're actually playing. The only problem is that once an injury happens on the field, Mitch Aubusson will always go to that position. So you're kind of hoping that no one in the back line gets injured in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes. And the same happens for Sione Matautia. But if you are playing them in your centers in fantasy, I think it's the correct... Theoretically, you're doing the correct thing. Sione Matautia this weekend scored 39 points, looked really good in the first 33 minutes, and then got a concussion test. Now, if he doesn't get concussed, he plays the full 80, which he has traditionally been playing the full 80 at the second row for the Newcastle team in the back row there, he definitely scores. He probably scores another 25 points. He gets above 60 this round, which would have been amazing for a second rower, or a centre. I shouldn't say second rower. He's effectively a second rower playing in the centre position. for your fantasy team would have been the correct decision to make. Another question I got on Twitter was at Nath_0110. What do you reckon about trading French for Holmes? Both should be similar price next week. I think if you've held French for this whole time, you should probably keep him because he's going to have amazing buy coverage. Parramatta Eels play the first two major bye rounds, which can't be said for any other team other than the Sharks. So you've held French. French has kind of leveled out. Let's have a look at him, actually. Let's have a look at where he's going. He's effectively leveled out. He hasn't gone higher than what he was last year, but he hasn't gone lower. In fact, he's scoring 39, 37, 25, 26, 39. His break-even again is 32, so he's probably going to be sitting around that 300 mark the whole time. Now, my suggestion was, if there's any other way you can bring him in, please do it, because I've definitely traded in Valentine Holmes. In fact, I traded in Valentine Holmes for Brian Kelly, who I think has kind of hit his roof. And I always wanted Valentine Holmes. Before the season kicked off, I wanted him. But the moment it was said that he wasn't playing the first round due to injury, I took him out because that becomes a liability. The fact that Holmes has now come back from, his injuries, played a couple of rounds and then played absolutely amazing, kind of solidifies that he's here to stay. He's definitely going to be one of the top fullbacks, and his buy coverage. He plays both round 12 and 15, which is your two major buy rounds. So I'd definitely be picking him up now before he skyrockets. He's already gone up, so he's only up 2k from his overall price at the start of the season. So a lot of people brought him in before round 1, held on to him, hoping that he was going to come back for round 2. Disappointed because he didn't end up playing till round 3, and that was on the wing where he transitioned to fullback with Jack Bird, and they were mucking around. And now that he finally played a game at fullback for the full round, we finally got to see his full potential. So I think you need to bring him in because he could potentially score the likes of, the Tedescos, the younger version of Billy Slaters. So I've brought him in because I think he's undervalued at 300,000. But also to the side note that my back line is a complete breakdown. It is a mental breakdown at the moment. I've got Tyrone Roberts-Davis, and I had Braden Burns here, who scored 10 and 11 last week for me, while I had Kotrick on the bench, and that absolutely killed me. The other thing I want to point out here is that I've got Tyrone Roberts-Davis playing again because he's been named at fullback over Tyrone Roberts, as confusing as it sounds because Tyrone Roberts is now injured. The other thing is I've got Karl Lawton, and I played Karl Lawton the last two rounds because he's been backup utility hooker, and I thought he might have been switched into the hooker role a little bit more earlier than at least 2 games ago. And last round he came in at about the 15-minute mark. Ryan Simpkins was playing hooker. He got injured, and I thought, you beauty. Lawton's probably going to play 50 minutes at hooker. He's definitely going to be outscoring many of the other centers for the simple fact that he'll get tackle stats. He's also a little darty hooker where he loves to take his little key runs every now and then. He's going to be good because he did that against round 2 in the Knights. He got 44 in the first 33 minutes before getting injured again. So that's when he started there. So what had happened was Tyrone Roberts got injured after the fact that Ryan Simpkins got injured. So Karl went from being the hooker to now being on the wing, and that kind of exploded in my face because then I had Brian Kelly and also Talakai not playing the position of centre and Lawton underscoring both of them. So the train of thought was there, and one thing I've got going for me this round is that the Gold Coast play Canberra, and if Karl Lawton doesn't slip into the number 9 spot just before kickoff, I'm going to bring Kotrick in for Lawton, or at least substitute him so that way Kotrick plays, because I think Lawton at hooker does a better job than Kotrick on the wing if Lawton starts at hooker, but we've got to wait 1 hour before the game. We know that Simpkins is carrying some sort of an injury from the last game that they played. Hopefully he doesn't get named at all, and we can kind of secure that spot. But that is pretty much my team for this round. Those are my 2 trades. I'm bringing in a much-needed Hampton for, Bryce Cartwright. I'm also bringing in Valentine Holmes because I need kind of that solid wing fullback position sorted for at least 3 people. I've also got Kalen Ponga sitting on the sideline waiting to bring him in for Tyrone Roberts-Davis if Kalen Ponga does get named at fullback 1 hour before kickoff. And the thing I've got going for me there is that the Cowboys just play after at 7:30, where there would usually be some rumblings by then, at least in the media, like a wacko whispers or someone saying on a social media saying, well, Lachlan Cooter's confirmed out, despite it being a couple of hours before the kickoff, before it's required to bring him out. So for me, I'm going to keep this episode short. I want to do a longer episode next week, more just to touch base with you guys, see how things are going. Let me know in the comment section below how you guys are going, because it's been a while. We're now up to round 6. Where is your rank? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Next week, I plan on clearing more of the headspace around having buy coverage for around 12, 15, 19 effectively, and doing an episode on social media. I know we said that last time, but just due to the timing differences of what's happening right now, I'm just going to have to keep this one short for now. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been Spot the Aussie, your favorite fantasy coach, and we will talk soon.